Hi, everyone, and welcome to God's Views on Political News. We're glad to be back with you again this week. Just a reminder that if you have any comments or questions during the show, please don't hesitate to write them out for us, and we'll try to get to them as we go through the show. We have a lot to talk about today, Bill. There's a lot in the news.
Yeah, well, what else is new? I mean, there's all kind of crazy people out there. So there's always going to be lots to talk about with all these crazy people.
Can you remember a time when there was actually like a week where it was sort of quiet and we were kind of looking for news? Do you remember those days?
Somewhat, I mean, but with all this information that we have at our fingertips, boy, I think that contributes to it as well. We've got it at our fingertips, because I know in the mornings when I'm kind of running through my Twitter feed, looking at what happened in the world overnight, I find my blood pressure going up with every time I do my finger down.
I know. And you can go to so many different websites and everybody has a different opinion, and you could spend hours and hours of your life just looking at different things that are happening in the news. We have what everybody knows is in the news these days. The topic on everybody's mind is the repeal and replacement of Obamacare. Yeah. We're just speeding right along in that regard too.
Well, here's where we're going to find out if they really meant what they said, huh?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It started out where a long time ago, 7 years ago has it been now, I think, that we've had Obamacare. Everybody said, you get us in there as Republicans, we'll promise you, we will repeal Obamacare. And we had President Trump, we'll repeal Obamacare day one. And I really do believe that he had that in mind to do. But what he failed to think about was the people in Congress who, the GOP, who are sitting there, and they've had 7 years to come up with a plan, and they don't have a plan.
Well, okay, let's back up a little farther. What they said was that they would repeal Obamacare. My position is, and I think you agree with this, at least to some point, I don't think the government should be involved with this in the first place. Yeah. I think they should just repeal it, get out of it, and leave it to the private sector, And so it's bothersome to me, that Republicans, Democrats, whatever, conservative, liberal, any of them feel that the government should be the ones to determine what health insurance I have available to me, how much it's going to cost, what it's going to cover, all those kinds of things. Because going back to last week's program, when we talked about Charlie Gard and all the things that were going on with him, this is what it leads to. Right. The government and hospital boards and courts making decisions that parents and individuals should be allowed to make. All right, that being said, so the Republicans don't have a plan. You mean they told us something they really didn't mean 7 years ago? I can't believe it.
I know. They never lie.
They should never do that, right? They play politics. I think that there are some men and women in Congress who really want to do the right thing. Unfortunately, I think they're vastly outnumbered by those who are on both sides, Republican and Democrat, who are the consummate politician, the elitists, and who care nothing other than staying in power. But that being said, now McConnell says, okay, we don't have a plan that's going to work, so we're going to bring it to a vote as to just, repeal it. And so now the problem is getting enough Republican senators who said, or in fact, I think they signed off on a bill several years ago. Was it 2015?
Somewhere around down there, yeah. That they would just go ahead and repeal it?
That they would repeal it. They signed it then, knowing Obama was going to veto. But now some of them, I'm really concerned about this issue or that issue. So, it's just politics as usual, once again.
Well, and it's amazing too. We start out with it. First of all, having Paul Ryan, I don't know who made him the czar for the healthcare bill. I really don't know how that got in place. I guess because he's Speaker of the House, he was just elected. That was just assumed that he was going to do it. I've heard so many people talk about this, and I believe this myself, that that Paul Ryan really didn't want to give us anything that much different than Obamacare. He wanted Obamacare to stay in, and he also wanted a plan where if he got it in there, the new health care bill, he was hoping that it would fail. And so that way he could say, look at President Trump. He failed. I mean, let's face it. Paul Ryan does not like President Trump. He was heard during the campaign on the campaign trail saying, I'm never going to support this guy if he makes president. Could he have changed his mind? Yeah, he probably could. Knowing what I know about Paul Ryan and read about Paul Ryan, I think he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. I really do. And I think also Mitch McConnell is the same way. I think they're both rhinos. They want this president to fail and in terms of his agenda and what he's trying to push. And they're doing everything that they can do to make that happen. It started out at 142 pages in the House. It went to the Senate. It was 172 pages because they put back most of the taxes that Obamacare had in it. So we put that back. We start putting things back in, and it starts looking like Obamacare again. It never really changed from looking like Obamacare. And I say, thank goodness for the three senators, Rand Paul, Moran, and Mike Lee, who said, I'm not going to vote for this. It's not what you promised the people. You told the American people that there was going to be a repeal. Now, President Trump had come out about a week before and said, why don't you just repeal it? And Mitch McConnell.
After meeting with Rand Paul.
Exactly. And saying, no, we can't repeal it. We got this. And then we started using the excuse, well, John McCain, he went in, he had surgery for a blood clot. He went into the Mayo Clinic, which I just wanted to add because all the veterans are having to go to the VA, not like the Mayo Clinic. Because this healthcare is not fair between the American people and what Congress gets. And so we have this happening, and then we come to a point where it's like, okay, John McCain's in the hospital. We don't have him to vote on this. So let's just go ahead. You know what? President Trump wants this to be repealed. Let's just go ahead and let's just take a vote on the repeal. And it's like you said, now, Bill, we have three Congress people so far in the GOP. Susan Collins, Murdowski, and Capito, I think is her last name. She probably has a hyphen. From West Virginia. Oh, you know what? I need to see something in place before I vote on this. I'm not going to vote to repeal it because I have my concerns that need to be met.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, but I think that most people that voted for Trump, and in a lot of these, congressional and Senate races, voted with the idea, if we put them in power, they'll do what they said they would do, or we're going to give them the chance to do what they said they were going to do. So if they don't do what they said they're going to do, then people just need to realize they will tell you what you want to hear to get what they want, but they're never going to do, if they get their way, that is, they're never going to do what they tell you they're going to do. They're going to play these word games. They're going to shift things around, So when it comes to health care, first thing that comes to mind here is a statement that Ronald Reagan made a long time ago. And that is, government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. And we've got people on both sides now who see government as the solution, or at least that's the line they're feeding people, that government is the solution. We're not talking about Democrats now. We're talking about a bunch of these Republicans, so-called conservatives. And so when it comes to health care and other facets of our life, what we as believers need to keep in mind is government is never going to be the solution to these kinds of things. We only have one source when it comes to whether it's our protection, our health, and our just provision in general, and that's our Heavenly Father. Yeah, we live in a real world. We live having to deal with temporal things and all these issues, but the frustration that I feel at the politics of all this leads me back to the realization there's only one that I'm going to be able to trust in this and every other facet of life. I'm really going to have to look to him. And so at times I wonder, and I'm not making this dogma, I'm just wondering if God allows these kinds of things to happen to see that we can't count on men. We can't count on those who tell us they're going to do what we feel they should do. We can't count on the flesh. There's only one we can count on. And the issue of healthcare, there's several different tentacles in this, as far as I'm concerned, as it relates to faith and God's views and things like that. But this is the main thing I think we should lead off with today, that we cannot count on those people who say they're going to do these things to do if it's going to interfere with what they feel is in their best interest. There's only one we can count on. And we need to pray.
And we need to pray, and big time. Jeffrey's saying, I've said from the beginning, the GOP will lose the House and Senate if they can't or don't keep the promises of the people of the nation. I believe they will lose control of at least one of the houses in the midterm elections if they can't work together. And I think that's pretty clear. I mean, if we have got to get it together. And, I think people last night felt, oh, this is great. Now we're going to go and we're going to finally repeal Obamacare. And people had some hope that we were going to get done some of the things that we said that we we're going to do. And the big thing was repeal Obamacare. And now we have these three people. I think they happen to be coincidentally three women who are coming out and saying,
you said that. I didn't.
I know. But, I'm reporting the facts, right? And I just think that, that we have these people who are obstructionists. I mean, they find a reason to obstruct no matter what. They should go on over to the Democrat Party, and just because that's in a lot of respects, I think they think the same way. And I think we need to get people out like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. They need to be voted out. Wisconsin has Paul Nealon, who's running against Paul Ryan. He's a great candidate. He could get Paul Ryan out. He's going to need money. And I think it's a shame that we have to have money, so much money, to put good people into position of some authority. And I want to know too, Bill, what does the Bible say about the responsibility of those that govern over the people? What are they supposed to be like? Because as you said, we got these people who are lying to us. What does the Bible say about that?
Well, first of all, the way that our system was supposed to work would be more in line with the biblical principle. For instance, when Moses was told to go find different elders and people to help him lead the people, it wasn't an election. Actually, he elected people that he knew that their virtues and character. He understood that these were people who had good character, that had a good name, and so these were the kind of people that were selected to lead the people. All right. So, in an ideal world, that's the kind of people that we should be putting in office. People who have virtue, who have character, who are from among the people. Now, I know that that's what they tell us we do, but at this point in time, money buys position. If you don't have the money, I mean, you think of all the money that was spent in the last election cycle for the presidency. That was an unbelievable amount of money. And so if you don't have those kinds of connections, you might as well forget running for high office like that. I mean, 100 years ago, or at least in the time of Lincoln, the average citizen could walk up to the door of the White House, step inside, and ask to see the President of the United States. But now, well, I'm getting off target just a little bit. But when it comes to leaders, the Bible has this to say: they are to be people of good and noble character. However, it also says this, that when we have leaders who are not good, who are of good and noble character, it is a reflection of the fact that people are not of good and noble character. We have allowed these things to enter into, and now we have these career politicians dictating who I'm going to be able to buy insurance from, or what I'm going to be able to do. Again, I want to stick with the fact that in all things, our Father in heaven is our ultimate source. When I need healing, I need to be able to go to Him. That doesn't remove the fact that I have a responsibility in what I put into my body, how I treat my body. A lot of health care or a lot of health care issues is because of how we mistreat our bodies, the garbage we put into our bodies, the processed foods that we'd rather have a Twinkie than an apple. I mean, I realize that people break legs, wives get pregnant. I mean, those things happen, and we need help with those kinds of things. I understand that. But a lot of our healthcare issues is because we do what we want to do. We eat what we want to eat. We mistreat our bodies, and then we want somebody to fix it. And we want the government to make sure that we all have health insurance in that regard. So when we have a people who are lacking in nobility and virtues and character, then we're going to see that reflected in the leaders we have. Now, that's what the Bible has to say.
And I would agree with you, that part of the responsibility of us is taking care of ourselves. But I think it's also important to point out that even though we could take a lot of, care of ourselves and do what we can, our environment caused by not us in particular as individuals has been polluted. As I was telling you before we started, there was evidence that they're saying that there's TCP in the water in Central California. People didn't put that in there, but the agriculture probably put that in there from the chemicals that we spray on the agriculture and on and on. And again, part of that is the responsibility of those that govern. If they want to be true leaders, then they need to be the ones who are looking out for us. Not that we shouldn't look out for ourselves. We don't need to have, a government telling us what to do, but it's part and parcel of what they are supposed to do as, leaders, that they've self-imposed leaders or whatever the case may be.
Well, leaders are supposed to be, and this is coming from a biblical point of view.
Right.
Leaders are supposed to be shepherds, and shepherds lay down their life for the sheep. All right. They put themselves between the lion and the flock. They put themselves between the bear and the sheep. That's what leaders are supposed to do from a biblical point of view. So then, to your point, if those in government see that someone is abusing their liberties and so as to infringe on the health and liberties of others, it is the duty of government to protect its citizens. But and so I would agree with that. And so there are circumstances that arise that it has negative impacts on our health in general. But my point here is that the reason we don't have shepherds in leadership, generally speaking,
right, is
a reflection of what we want, what we have turned our attentions toward, what we've neglected. We have a responsibility in that. Now, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't speak up and tell these guys, look, you said you were going to do this, and this is what we want. You need to follow through with it. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, our health care should not be determined by any government. It shouldn't be determined by any politician. We as believers need to be good stewards of everything the Creator has given us, and that includes our body. And when we get sick, as an American citizen, I ought to be able to decide who I'm going to buy health insurance from and what kind of a plan I want, and not have the government sticking their fingers in everything. This is the problem as far as I'm concerned in that regard.
Yeah, and I look at it that way as well. I mean, I think, it's our responsibility as people without, again, we don't need a government. If we do what we should do is what God's purpose is for us, taking care of the land, taking care of the animals, doing what we're supposed to do, we don't necessarily need all of these people that we have in government. And we certainly don't need those people in government sticking their business into industries that they have no business being in, like the marriage, in marriage or in other thing that they do, and certainly not in insurance. We had a perfectly good insurance system working before, where we were able to go out and buy insurance. Most people did, practically everybody. There was a very small portion of the population that could not afford insurance. And it was decided, so we're going to change the entire system based on this small portion, rather than going out and finding what was the best thing for this small portion and fixing that.
Well, so, I will say, just from a personal personally, my insurance, first of all, I'm blessed. I'm fortunate in that we had a plan that was allowed to be grandfathered in. I don't have to go, do the Obamacare thing, and I don't have to pay the penalties and all the things, because we had a plan that was grandfathered in. And the company has kept it. And I'm very, very fortunate in that. And I realize that there's a lot of people that didn't work out that way for them. They lost their insurance, but I will say, mine has tripled in costs in just the last several years.
Yep.
And it is directly because of Obamacare. This that was supposed to make it affordable for everybody, that was a bunch of baloney. So anything that's going to be presented as we're going to replace it with this other government plan, I'm not interested, frankly. I think they just need to get out of it. I mean, apples and oranges here, but how did your DMV experiences go in California?
Not good.
I have some friends that tell me that it takes hours upon hours just to go into the DMV and get your license renewed or whatever. And that in your state, California, it can be very, very costly.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. And you have to, when you go there, you have to, almost like a lottery sometimes, you're given a number and you have to wait in line. And there's so many people, you look around and it's just filled with people in some of the businesses that you go in, or the buildings that you go into.
Okay, well, I don't care if it's a Republican plan or Democratic plan. If the government's going to be in charge of healthcare, that's going to be what it's like when you go to the hospital, when you need to go to the emergency room, when you need to go to the doctor. That's what it's going to be like. And that's why, as far as I'm concerned, government should not even be involved with this. And so I'm really hopeful, and I'm going to pray that if these 3 Republicans are going to back out, then God will replace them with 4 Democrats that'll vote for a repeal.
Exactly. No, and I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's, and we do need to go back to praying, because that is our first line of defense on everything that we do. And I think, Bill, looking at that, I think if you really want to know when the government is in charge, what it will look like, you just look no further than the VA system. Because if you want to see how screwed up something can be, how uncaring people can be, how you're just a number and you don't really matter. And I say this from talking to veterans. I'm not just saying this because, what other reasons, but in talking to a number of veterans, they have the worst health care there is. We had a system. All we need to do to fix this, and I'll just say this real quickly, in my opinion, you cover those people, that small amount of people that didn't have insurance. People want pre-existing conditions, so you kind of, fix that a little bit. And then you allow the insurance companies to sell you a policy that fits your family and sells it to you across state lines, that you can go anywhere you want, whatever state, to get the best quality of care that you can afford. And that's it. At the end of the day, go home, government, stay out of our business, and fix the tax code. Do something that we really need you to do, that you have to do.
Well, and I think, Susan, it's important for people to keep this in mind. In spite of the fact that people are arguing this, healthcare is not a right.
Yeah, exactly. It isn't.
Health insurance is not a right. Look, I'm not even guaranteed I'm going to be alive tomorrow. Life is not a right. It is a gift. It is something that the Creator has given all of us, and has given us the responsibility to be good stewards of that, take care of it the best we can. Yeah, we live in a fallen world. Stuff happens. There are people and different things around us that we have no control over, that we're just asked to respond to. But we have to get out of this way of thinking that I'm entitled to this. No, you're not. You have been given the good fortune and blessing of being in a nation that says that we have rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And all of that comes from the Creator. And when He says my life is over, that's the way it is, and so that's why I say that in all things we have to come back to this realization. Our Creator, our Father in heaven, is our ultimate source. He's the one that we need to be looking to for these things. And when we start doing that, collectively, I think that we will find that many of these issues will begin to be addressed and resolved in a good and righteous way.
And to go to your point that you just said, that it's not a right, that, having insurance is not a right. It is if you're a socialist. And see, that's the problem.
Right, right.
And that is the problem.
That was my kind of my point.
Exactly.
Those people who feel it is a right are those people who feel they have a right to do whatever they want to do, say whatever they want to say, and eat whatever they want to eat, act however they want to act, and still get what I want, still get my blessing, still get the good stuff. And I'm going to launch out here into a little rabbit trail. You and I were first introduced because of the book I wrote last year about Esau rising. And I'm just mentioning that for this reason. That is the mentality of Esau. Esau wants the stuff. He just doesn't want to have to be responsible. He doesn't want to have to live up to the responsibility of the birthright, in his case, in order to get the blessing of the things. That's socialism. That's progressivism. That's what's going on in our streets and in our world today. And the government is kowtowing to this mentality by even getting involved with things like, we're going to decide who gets health care. How?
Yeah, I know. We're really, really off track with what God, I think that God would have us do and what we should be doing. Our laws are not in line with biblical principles anymore, and it's because we have gone away from biblical principles in our government. You can see that. And the people need to remind the government, you need to get back on track and be what the people want. And the people, hopefully, are in line with the biblical principles. We're not socialists. Not only am I wanting it for myself when I'm a socialist, but I want to take what you have for myself, and that's not biblical at all. And when we're talking about healthcare, one of the things, like I said a minute ago, I think you just only have to look at the VA to see how bad healthcare is. You only have to look at the veterans, homeless veterans. We have a ton of them on the streets to see how ineffective their healthcare has been. And I want to tell you the story that I just heard a couple of days ago, and I think it's important for people to know. I think sometimes we forget that we're dealing with so many things that we forget about those that are less fortunate. And those not only are less fortunate, but that have gone out, protected us, give us the ability to live free in the United States. So I always like to bring up the stories about the veterans. There was a veteran that a younger man served his country, had a lot of problems with PTSD from what he had seen in combat. He came back. He's a father, married, had 2 children, 10 and 12, I believe. And he had a rough time of it, and he'd gone to the VA. They had given him, pills readily available there at the VA. And he'd been on alcohol and drugs. He'd gotten off of that, had been clean and sober for like 18 months. So he had arranged for an organization to look at him for consideration for what they call HBOT, which is hyperbaric oxygen therapy. He was excited about being able to go. It was like a 2-month treatment. The ability that I'm hearing under people that go through HBOT for PTSD and TBI, which is traumatic brain injury, for them to get off of a prescription medication, it's been absolutely very successful, very great thing. This is something that Israel has used for a very long time in their soldiers in Israel. They believe in HBOT. They think it's wonderful. They've seen great success. So he goes to the VA. He starts telling a doctor, "Hey, doc, I'm so excited about going and having this treatment." And the doctor allegedly looks at him and says, basically, it's just a scam. Why are you wasting your time? They just want your money. It's not going to help you. It's a scam. You just need to continue taking your pills and doing what we've told you to do at the VA. You'll be fine. So he goes home. He was so distraught about what this doctor had just said to him. He went right back to drinking, went back to abusing prescription drugs, and he committed suicide. That's the VA system that we have come to know and a lot of veterans know. And one of the reasons we need to fix healthcare, not only for us, but for them as well.
Well, first of all, that is a tragedy that repeats itself every day, several times a day. And that should not happen. If the government is going to be involved in any kind of health care and making sure someone gets health care, it should be those that have been called upon to serve this country and to go and to fight these battles on the front line and to see things that nobody wants to see and to hear things that nobody really wants to hear. Though, yeah, I would say the government needs to be heavily involved in making sure that those kind of men and women receive everything that we can possibly provide for them. And with that in mind, I want to read you a scripture here. I was pulling it while you were sharing, and has to do with Sodom and Gomorrah. And, you know, and anybody's familiar with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, they automatically connect, you know, certain behaviors, certain lifestyles, homosexual lifestyle to Sodom. And that's appropriate. But I want you to hear what God says about why he judged Sodom. He said, and this is in the book of Ezekiel, he said, look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride, fullness of bread, or, you know, plenty to eat, abundance of idleness, had plenty of time on their hands, and neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. And they were haughty, and they committed abomination before me. Therefore, I took them away as I saw fit. And so my point is this. You think of all the things that lobbyists and different, you know, special interest groups are making our politicians respond to, and what's got their attention and what they're making priorities. And then you stop and think about the stories like you just shared with us happening day after day, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that Sodom was guilty of, we're guilty of. I mean, we have an abundance, and yet we don't care for those who don't. We have lots of time on our hands. I mean, we've got a generation, and I'm not talking about little kids now. I'm talking about 20-somethings, even 30-somethings. They spend their time gaming. You know, this is how they make their living, you know, making and playing games. And yet we've got men such as this that feel like they have nowhere to turn to. And I would also add this, and I think I saw a comment come up similar to this just a moment ago from Jeffrey. This is where believers need to step in. This is where we need to get our eyes off. I don't have this and I don't have that, and this is what I want. We need to quit thinking about those kinds of things so much and start saying, hey, we need to be the ones to plug the gap here. If the government's not going to do it, and by the way, perhaps government's not supposed to do it all the time. Maybe God's trying to focus our attention on the fact that we need to be stepping in. And I know that there are ministries and churches that do this, but in mass, at large, believers need to have the mindset of we need to be the ones taking care of the widow and the orphan, those who are sick, those who are distraught, those who feel like they have no hope. It's a tragedy that there wasn't a believer in that man's path to say, hey, look, you know, I can't do what the VA can do, but here's what I can do. And there was a man that's recorded in the book of Acts, and I know I'm kind of going all over the place here, but I am trying to make a point that is relevant to our discussion. There's a man that was recorded in the book of Acts that he had been lame all of his life, and he sat there at the temple, and one day Peter and John were coming in, and he was going to ask them for some alms. He was going to ask them for some contribution. And they basically said, look at me, you know, do I look like I have a bunch of money? He said, I don't have any silver and gold, but what I have, I'm going to give you. And they prayed for that man, and that man was healed. All right. Now you're talking about the ultimate health care. Now, some people say, well, Bill, that's not practical. That's not realistic. You know, those kinds of things just don't happen anymore. Is it that they don't happen anymore because God decided they don't happen anymore? Or is it they don't happen anymore because we don't take our faith seriously? And we don't genuinely look to God as the author and the finisher of our faith, the source of all of our needs and provision. we're conditioning ourselves or allowing ourselves to be conditioned to think that the government is the answer for these things. I'm not saying the government shouldn't do its job. I'm not saying the government shouldn't do what's right. They should. But ultimately, as believers, we don't need to condition ourselves to look to the government as the final answer on all these things. So that story is disturbing, and that's just one.
Yeah.
It happens every day, and it happens multiple times a day.
At least 22. That's the statistic. And I have a group of people that follow me in my shows that I do. They call themselves the Knowles Crew, Knowles KREW.
So you have a posse, is that what you're saying?
and they are absolutely wonderful people, loyal supporters and everything else. And they know that I kind of adopted this group of homeless veterans that are in Arizona who have done exactly what you just said. They have gone out without help from the government. They don't even take cash donations. They just take goods and, whatever you want to provide them, food and things like that. And they go out and they search for homeless veterans and they take them off the street and they have them live in their tent cities with them. That's all they have are tents, but they give them a safe place. And the group that I'm with, we just recently were taking donations through today. And we're giving them supplies. We're giving them, I went out and bought blankets and socks and everything else with the money that I received in the donations to send to them, because that's the way that we should do it. Just like what you said, we're the ones that need to step up and take care of them. And thank God for the people in that Arizona group. The man who went out, all he was going to do was walk around and bring awareness to the 22 a day that killed themselves, the veterans that killed themselves. And that ended up, he listened to God. He's done what God has told him to do. And he's opened up these places all around in Arizona. And while he does that, he brings the veterans in. The veterans, bring the people in the parks that are next to them. They go in, they clean out the syringes where people have gone in there and shot up with heroin. They get the drug dealers out of there. They get the crime rates down. And it's just an absolutely positive experience all the way around. But it started with one man who listened to God and did what he was supposed to do.
Well, Susan, that's how God works in the earth. And from the very beginning, that's how he's chosen to do it, to work through people. A lot of people want to see this dramatic, lightning bolt coming down from heaven and doing these things. It typically doesn't happen that way. What happens is God puts it on the heart of an individual, like you just described, who goes out and becomes the hands of God,
Yes.
And because, when it comes to health care, that word care should be really emphasized. Anybody can give a person a pill, a shot. But when you're in a situation, whether it's physical ailments or an emotional ailment, care is what you need. Compassion, the human touch, the human element. And because that is God working to minister to people through those that hear his voice, do who he's telling them to do. And what this gentleman and these other people that you described in Arizona are doing is something we as the body believers should become part of who and what we are. Government is always going to fall short. Government's always going to fail. Government's going to be what's the word I'm looking for? The cold, surgical, environment. Sterile. Thank you. We need the Claire Bartons and the people who are going to be there to give that human touch that, there is somebody who cares, because those kinds of things I'm convinced anyway, have as much to do with someone healing physically as any medication, any shot, any pill that you can be given. It's something about people caring for you and healing that deeper part of someone, because a lot of times, and I know that there are exceptions, but a lot of times our physical problems are a reflection of emotional and spiritual problems. Things that are happening spiritually are going to be manifest physically. And I realize that doesn't cover every situation.
Right.
But gosh, this gentleman that took his own life, what would have happened had someone been there, you know, to speak to that emotional aspect of things?
Yeah, I think it would have probably saved his life. And even the group in Arizona, I wish they had known him because they could have stayed with him. And I think what's so fantastic about this group too, they kind of go around the government in a lot of respects because the government tells them, well, we got to do this, 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 and this, and it takes forever. They've gotten not only those veterans off the street and into their tents, but they've been able to get the VA there to come and see them, to come to them rather than trying to get to the VA, which they have no transportation a lot of times to get there unless they can be provided. But also they get these people into housing that would have taken years, if at all, for them to get in there. So I think it's like Moses, I can't do this, I'm not able. You can't, but God can. And I think, thank God that this man listened to God and just took one step at a time and continues to do what God tells him to do. And he'll be the first to say, it's not about me, it's about God. And if you look at that program, and A&E is doing a documentary now on that program because people are looking at it going, there's something happening here and we don't understand it. Well, what's happening here are the miracles of God. If you let God work, it can happen, and that's all it is. It's God working.
Well, here's what I sense in our conversation so far. We've been talking about 40 minutes now. Here's what I sense, that we look at what's going on in the news. We look at what's going on in the Senate, what's going on in the House, what's going on in the political realm. And we see chaos. Right. We see the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, people playing games, and who gets left out? Joe Average.
Right.
Okay. All right, then now compare that to those individuals that are hearing the voice of God, feeling compassion for their fellow human being, and look at what can happen and does happen without the government.
Yes.
Seems to me maybe God's trying to bring us to the point of realizing in all facets of life, the politician, the government agency will fail you. But if you'll listen to me, if you'll heed my voice, if you'll let me work in you and through you, then I can bring about something. This little group in Arizona may be touching, dozens or hundreds, maybe even thousands. I don't know. And I realize we're talking millions. But if it can work in Arizona, then it can work in California. It can work in Tennessee. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it seems to me that this perhaps is what we need to take away from today's conversation. The utter failure that government has become, and this is my word, joke that most, not all, politicians are when it comes to really wanting to do what's right for the people. All right, this is a random thought just popped into my head. All right, the word politician comes from the Greek term polis, and polis is the word for city. All right, so it's related to the idea of the city. All right, here's where I'm going with this. Judas Iscariot. A lot of people think Iscariot is Judas's last name. Of course, Judas is the one that betrayed the Messiah, right? Do you remember the story where the woman comes in and she's got this very expensive ointment and she breaks the jar open and she is, anointing the Messiah in this, and Judas gets all, flustered and says, this could have been taken and sold and the proceeds given to the poor. Well, John, the one who records it in the Gospel of John, says he wasn't interested in the poor people. He was the one that kept the purse. He was taking money out of the purse to benefit himself. All right, here's my point. Iscariot is not his last name. Iscariot is a Hebrew term that means a man of the cities. So Judas was a man of the cities, polis, remember?
Right.
Okay? Who, for everybody who was listening, says, I want to help the poor. But he wasn't really wanting to help the poor. He was wanting to line his own pockets and benefit himself. My point is that is the average politician who says they want to help the poor, the needy, the distraught, the people who don't have. Well, most of them, no, that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in keeping their power. They're interested in doing what benefits them, and they'll use the people, the poor, the needy, as their fodder. And it comes down once again to you and me listening to the voice of the Father and having compassion and yes, making our voice known, calling our congressman, calling our senator. Let them hear what's on our hearts and on our minds, and pray that they'll do the right thing. But ultimately, it's going to come down to you and me. I'm sorry, I got long-winded and drawn out, but
no, it was great. And I like the fact too that Donald Trump, President Trump, said we're not going to allow you to line your pockets with the lobbyists that you've been doing. So
I hope he sticks to that. Yes,
I do too, because bring the focus back around to the people, because he knows that that's not where it is. He knows that's why the career politicians are there, and let's face it, that's why they hate him so much. That's why they're so afraid. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
He's taken away their ability to make a lot of money.
And, just something else that popped in my mind, I'm sure you've heard about it, but there was something that came out where he had some evangelical Christians gathered around him here recently, and they were praying for him. And this was just, created this big brouhaha. Yeah. And in fact, one minister, so-called, who's somehow a muckety muck with the NAACP, said that it is heresy for any Christian to pray for Donald Trump. To God, that more and more ministers and lay people would pray for the president.
I know, I do too.
That they would actually have the opportunity to lay hands on him and pray for him. And from the beginning, I've had my reservations and my cautions about Trump, but if we've got a president who is willing for people to gather in the Oval Office and pray for him, then let's fill the Oval Office with people who will pray for him, and let everybody that's listening to this, regardless of what you think about him as a person,
exactly.
He's the man that God has in this place right now. Let us pray for this man and your congressman and your senator, that they will do what is right in the eyes of God, not even the party or you, but what's right in the eyes of God. This is what we need, Susan.
It is. And to say, I don't know the last time or any time that I've ever seen a president have people come into the White House and lay hands on him and pray for him. Now, maybe it happened and we just didn't hear about it. I don't know. And I'm not taking away from anybody who did that. But the fact, people were kind of reluctant to think, well, is Donald Trump really a religious guy? Is he really just trying to do this or whatever? And I get it. Some of the things that he said, but, Bill, people say things, nobody's perfect. People are going to say things. People are going to cuss. People are going to say things that aren't too polite, whatever. We're people and we make mistakes. But the fact that, let's just say he had a heart of stone, right? The fact that he is allowing and calling for and requesting people to come in, people of God to come in and lay hands on him, you would have to turn anybody's heart. I don't care if it was of stone. It's got to be able and causing anybody's heart to change and to be more godlike. I don't care who you are. If you were the worst person in the world, and you opened yourself up enough to allow God to come in and have all of these people place their hands on you in the name of God, that says something for you as a human being, that you're open to God, that you're open to receiving God. I don't know his personal life. I know what he says his religious beliefs are, but I give him so much credit, and I admire the fact that he's willing, and I say this in all honesty, that he's willing to humble himself before God and allow people to come in who profess that they are Christians and place their hands on him to make him a better and godly man. I mean, that just, that does something good for my heart. It really does.
Well, if he will do that, if he will humble himself before God, he doesn't have to meet my standards or your standards or the other one's standards.
Right.
As long as he's humble, if he humbles himself before God and is doing what God wants him to do, I'm good with that.
Right.
I may not understand some of it, and some of it, quite frankly, I don't.
And you may not
But
agree with it all, you know.
right,
Yeah.
right. But who am I to challenge what God maybe wants to do through a person and in a person? All right.
Yeah.
So I will remain cautious about some things. Some things still bother me, but I'm just saying that if a man is going to allow people to come into his office and lay hands on him and pray for him, and by the way, I know a few of these people that went in there and were part of this.
Yes.
And I've heard, not directly, but indirectly, that they're convinced that he does want God's guidance. You know, I can't say that firsthand.
Right.
I can't say that firsthand, but that's what I'm told. So if that's true, and if he continues in this way, I will predict that things will get uglier.
Yeah.
Because the career politician and those who are given into another spirit and who would be resistant to whatever it is that God wants to do at this hour, and I don't pretend to know, but anyone that would be resistant to that, you're going to see how they manifest, you know, and it's going to get uglier.
It's going to get uglier.
If the president continues to invite God's guidance, you know?
Right.
Now I say that realizing that people are going to say, Billy, have you lost your mind? Are you crazy? Have you heard what this guy said? Have you seen what? Yeah, I know. I have the same, I have the same responses. I have the same concerns. But I believe that God's ways are far beyond ours, and his thoughts are not our thoughts. And I guess what I'm just trying to say is, I'm very thankful that we have a leader who at least wants people to pray for him. Who invites that.
Right. But look at this. Did people feel that way about Paul? Paul killed Christians, right?
Right.
But God changed him and God used him. And so we could have written Paul off and said, this guy's no good. Let's not even pay attention to him because he killed people. So, like you said, we don't always know what his plans are and how he's going to use people. And also at the same time, keeping in mind that Donald Trump, just like any other human being, is imperfect. And we should not worship Donald Trump. We should not follow Donald Trump as if he, is our God. We follow him as long as biblical principles are applied, kind of like we said at the beginning of the show. He has to be, what he does has to be in line with biblical principles as as governing the United States.
Well, we just need to continue to pray for him.
Right.
We need to pray for his administration.
Yes.
We need to pray that all of those people that are in government would do what is right in the eyes of God. But that prayer is going to carry a lot more weight if we're doing what's right in the eyes of God.
Exactly.
So I go back to one of my original points. Ultimately, we need to look to God as He is the great physician.
Right.
He is our provider. He is the one we go to. He is the source for all these things that we have. And he gives us life, and he gives us the responsibility to look, to take care of what he's given us. Adam was formed in the very beginning. God breathed the breath of life into him, and then God put him in a garden. Now, God had made the garden, but he put Adam in the garden, and he told him to take care of it. You till it. You guard it. And you be responsible for it. And if you're not, some things are going to happen, and you're going to have to deal with this kind of stuff. Right. And that's what's going on. We're having to deal with all of this stuff now. So anyway, I'm getting long-winded again, but I just feel very strongly and particularly when it comes to this whole healthcare thing, that we should not condition ourselves to think that the government is the answer, will have the answer, can make things right, because they're going to fail us.
Yeah, they will each and every time because they are led by imperfect people. And I'd say for the things that Donald Trump has done and the things that he's said that you and I sometimes go, wow, did he really say that? That's between him and God. That that God will judge him. I don't think I need to. I can sit and say I don't like that, and I guess that's a judgment in a way. But I also believe at the same time that if a person is willing to open themselves up to God, that they can change. And I am seeing things in him that I like. He's a man that I had on my show just last night. Wrote a book called American Greatness. And Donald Trump is called the blue collar billionaire. That's what people refer to him as, because he has this ability that even though he's a billionaire, he can relate to the common man, and they love being around him. My guest talked about the staff loving to just hang around him and talk to him, and that Donald Trump loved to do the same thing. It's the person that we don't get to see that much of, because what we get to hear is what the politicians say about him, how bad he is and what he's done. I see a man that, apparently, as of late, and what I'm seeing myself, he seems to love America. He seems to love Americans. Now, he either does, or he's the biggest and best liar that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I don't think it's the latter. I think that he does love America. He's seen what has happened over the past 8 years to America when it was transformed under Obama. And I think he wanted to bring it back, and he's still trying to bring it back for the average man and woman in America who feels like they have no voice. And, I really like what I'm seeing. And again, I don't look at him as this guy is going to, be the end all to be all. God is that. But I like who God chose, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, at the end of the day, here's what Messiah said: "You shall know them by their fruit." And so, if it's an apple I'm looking at, it can't be grown on an orange tree. So, if we've been born again, then we produce the good fruit. And so, if Mr. Trump has been born again, if he's really seeking God, if that's genuine, if that's sincere, it won't be overnight, but fruit will appear. And so I'm just sitting back and I'm just waiting to see what kind of fruit appears. I'm willing to give the man the benefit of the doubt that in the past he's been this, that, and the other, but now he is wanting to move closer to God. I'm just waiting to see the fruit. In the meantime, what in the world's wrong with praying for him?
Exactly. Nothing. It's what we're supposed to do.
Well, right. Let's pray for the man. Let's pray for his administration.
Absolutely.
This healthcare debate. I'm going to pray, God, change somebody's heart so that we can get rid of this government control thing, and then we can, that we can make decisions. We'll just see. We'll just see.
And I wanted to tell you, Carla said that she's so pleased she came across our show. And then, Bill, when you're long-winded, it's a truthful message, normally that which many need to hear, and thank us both for what we do. So
wow.
Your long-windedness has been great today.
Okay. Well, sometimes I can get a little preachy, so
that's okay. That. You're a kind of a preacher, right? I mean, well, hey, it's okay. And Robin says that she agrees with you. She's just waiting and praying. And I think that, that's a good thing to do. Wait and pray and see what God has to do and what God is going to work. God has taken people that we never suspected would amount to what God saw in them. And he took those that are weak to make them strong, because if they allow him in, that's what happens. And so I think, I've seen things that are good for America. I've seen him doing a lot of things for America. The man is 71 years old and could run circles around me. I don't know how he does what he does.
Well, I've noticed that he tweets early in the morning. So I'm like, good grief, when do you sleep? You know what? I want to share a quick story that pertains to what we're talking about. And this goes back many, many years ago. I had moved to Florida. My wife and I just moved. We'd just gotten married about a year. Moved to Florida, not far from Orlando. I was working with a company, and one day this guy comes in, and I'm waiting on this guy and talking to him. And I thought, this guy's the biggest jerk. He's obnoxious. He's just belligerent. I don't like him. And I just hated for him to come into the store. Well, about a year or two later, we started going to a church there in this little town. And my wife and I got involved with the choir. And so the first choir practice, I show up, and who am I standing next to? This obnoxious guy who, it turned out, is one of the nicest, most compassionate, friendly, cared about people, wanted to help people. He and his wife were the godparents of my two older sons. Wow. My point is sometimes I'm wrong.
But how wonderful that God gave you the opportunity to come back in contact with this man, to learn what you just said, to learn that lesson about, sometimes we are a little bit too quick to judge some people, and that who we think we know, we don't. And God gave you that chance to see that guy. And I think that's great. I really do.
So I'm just saying that in light of our conversation. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It worked once. Maybe it'll work again. So.
Not working again.
But I want to thank everybody for coming today. Thank you so much for all your comments and your questions today. And I really appreciate, and I know Bill does too, your support in coming here. So, and until next week, God bless you. We'll see you again next week. Take care, you guys.